but it looks like Riley will.
Oh, Riley will sit there all
They'll
day.
be hearing this.
Yeah. So before we get started, Peter, and I'm sure you're familiar, camera and all that, it's like Bill and the camera aren't even here, it's just like we're chatting. We can stop and start as we need or want to. It's very, much more forgiving than live. Much more forgiving than live motivational speaking.
Yes, when you say something, you say, oh, I wish I hadn't said that.
Yeah, if you say I wish I hadn't said that, we'll just edit it out. No one will ever know. And sort of, is there anything that you're sort of not comfortable talking about? Is there any,
No.
everything sort of, I mean, obviously we're not
What
gonna jump to.
what story is you doing?
Well, I'm sort of thinking about starting to talk about maybe when you were first diagnosed and sort of how it's affected you, how you manage Parkinson's, and sort of see where we go from there. Does that sound pretty?
How it impacts a person's life,
Yeah.
and how does it impact my career, my choices.
And family and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
It's probably a good idea to move that. You're singing well.
Let's start off with that.
Put your hand up.
Let's start off with
Ariel.
Oh, Ariel.
Ariel's quieter.
Ariel.
Yeah. Quiet toys are good for telling, for this part anyway.
And you gonna stay here for a second? You gonna stay?
You see yourself on TV.
Ariel hug? Ariel hug. Yeah. Big
Aw.
hug. Give you a big hug. What's the kitty say? It certainly does say meow. What's the doggy say?
Here, why don't you sit with Mommy? Mommy, yes.
I love her little tights. So cute.
She's a go, go, go.
Yeah,
She
I
knows
can see that.
There.
There
Watch
you
the
go.
camera.
Hands on TV.
Good. Are you guys all set?
Yeah,
We'll
sure.
take advantage of this
Let's do it.
quiet
let's do it,
moment
let's do
to
it.
start. So maybe, Peter, we could start if you could tell me a little bit about when you were first diagnosed with Parkinson's.
Yeah, in the spring of 2005, I started to notice my handwriting was a little odd. You know how people sign, you know how people sign their name anyway on credit card stuff. We usually just go. Well, I went to do it one time. I actually had to sign it, and I said, "This isn't working right." I also noticed that brushing my teeth was odd. I could brush the front of my teeth, but to get the back of my teeth was it just felt odd. So I had a doctor's appointment in July of 2005, and the doctor said, yes, that is kind of odd that you would have some difficulties with your hand. And he suggested I see a neurologist, which I did in October of 2005. The neurologist said, well, you certainly have some odd symptoms, and from the symptoms that you have, it looks like you have one or two things. You either have Parkinson's disease or brain tumor. I said, thank you for that choice.
Yeah.
So in January of 2006, I had an MRI that ruled out brain tumor, which defaulted back to Parkinson's.
Okay. So I think for so many people, when we hear Parkinson's, automatically mind goes to the tremors. But that wasn't sort of your first symptoms, it was just...
No, it's so different. It's such an odd disease because it's completely different for everybody that you cannot track the progress of the disease. For me, it was stiff. For me, it was my arm was stiff, my handwriting was stiff, it was slow. Just moving my arm was slow. Then I started noticing a bit of a foot drop, so my leg was a bit stiff. So for me, it was stiff. I got sort of the Muhammad Ali version of Parkinson's.
Okay. So you were given these two choices, brain tumor, Parkinson's. What goes through your mind when they said, okay, it's not a brain tumor, you've got Parkinson's disease?
Well, the first thing that went through my mind was my aunt, my Aunt Pauline. My mom's uncle married a woman by the name of Pauline, and Aunt Polly, and she had quite a significantly advanced case of Parkinson's. So I had a picture of what it could like, what it could look like in the future, and so I was very much aware of the possibilities of where it could go, and also aware of the grace and the peace and the serenity that a person can have when you have a disease like that, as my mom Pauline was sharing with the family.
And now I think a lot of people also not only sort of immediately mind go to tremors, but associate Parkinson's with the older set. And now you obviously were a younger man when you were diagnosed.
Well, I was 45, believe it or not, and Parkinson's is not an old person's disease, and I was actually, part of my learning about this disease was the fact that I associate with old people. I have the stereotype myself. This is an old folks disease, and as I'm learning, young onset or early onset Parkinson's is very, very, I was going to use the word popular, but that's not what I want. Hi, honey. Common, very common. Unfortunately doesn't affect babies, but I have a colleague that was 28 when she was diagnosed. She's a medical doctor. So that's how early they can strike. So there's totally a myth out there that Parkinson's is an all person disease. It is not an all person disease. It's a neurological disorder that can affect anybody's earliest age, 30.
So once you were given the diagnosis, sort of where did you go from there? Did you immediately start a course of treatment?
No, I actually didn't tell anybody for a year. I was ashamed. I'm a mountain climber. I've climbed the base camp of Mount Everest. I've climbed mountains on 3 continents in this glorious world of ours. I've run 2 marathons, and I'm a very active, outdoor, fit kind of guy. I thought to myself, this can't be happening to me. So I was actually in a state of denial and shock, and a bit of shame, saying that like I'm too young for this to happen. So a bit of shame. So I actually didn't tell anybody for a year, and I was really not very kind of bummed out about it. So.
And that must be difficult to do, sort of keep it bottled up inside and not be able to share it with your loved ones.
Oh, it's a guy thing. Guys can get away with that for a long time because guys are notoriously bad for taking care of our health. But the actual catalyst for exposing the disease was when I re-met Andrea. Andrea and I had dated 18 years ago, and we got together again in the summer of '06. And I realized that I was falling in love with her again, and I had to say that I had something that she should know about. And I was very nervous about sharing because it is a life debilitating disease in the long term. It doesn't kill you, but it certainly affects the quality of life in the long term. And I had to say, honey, I'm getting close to you. I just want you to know something that I practiced. And guess what? She said, so what? Now what?
Yeah.
So wow, you re-met after 18 years.
Yeah, it's a love story.
That is.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. So you were diagnosed about 5 years ago, roughly. Sort of how has the disease progressed or not progressed over the last 5 years?
As I mentioned, it's a very slow progression. No, I should say. As I mentioned, it affects different people different ways. For me, it's a very slow progression. So my right arm just gradually got stiffer and stiffer. My right leg got a little bit stiff, and I have sort of a slop. My foot slaps when I walk. And so I got used to the idea of not using my right hand as much as I used to. I transferred my computer mouse to the left hand, for example, and just little details like that. I brush my teeth with the left, toothbrush with the left hand. I could put up with that stuff for 5 years. I didn't mind it too much. It's a very slow progression, but just this spring of 2010, early January, February, I started noticing that my voice is going a little strange. So one of the things that it can affect, it doesn't always, but one of the things it can affect is the voice. And so my business as a motivational speaker, it's pretty important to have my voice. So that was the impetus for me to start the medication treatments.
Okay, so even after all these years, you've just recently started taking some medication.
April Fool's Day.
Wow, no joke.
No joke. No fooling.
And have you responded fairly well to it?
Well, it's just been a couple of weeks, and it's a very slow, gradual thing. The medication's course is to replace the dopamine that's lost, because the practice is a loss of dopamine, and dopamine controls the muscles and nerve cells. And so the medication actually reintroduces dopamine into the system because my brain doesn't produce as much as it should anymore. So I will notice a much more less tired. I will notice a smoother muscle movement, and hopefully a little bit smoother voice as well.
Now, when we were speaking with Mary a little earlier this morning, she said that aside from medication, one of the most important things for people living with Parkinson's disease to do is to stay physically active on a regular basis.
Yes,
You mentioned mountain climbing, marathon running, obviously super active.
Oh, one of the joys of having a baby.
Just a second.
Yep.
Yeah,
Sorry,
she's-
she was just pulling at your mic there.
That's right.
Yeah.
To answer your question about activity, one of the joys of having a baby is that you're very active.
Just do that again, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Third time's the charm.
One of the joys of having a baby is that you are physically active. I love going for walks with her in the backpack. She loves going in the backpack. So I carry an extra 25 pounds on me walking up a hill. Taking the dogs for a walk, of course, is lots of fun. And even doing things like blowing bubbles. You want to blow some bubbles? Just bubbles. So having a baby is a wonderful bonus to that because it does get you out. So physical activity is the only proven way to keep Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and other diseases at bay. There's lots of theories out there with different health remedies and all that kind of stuff. But physical activity is absolutely proven to be top notch. So I take the dogs for a walk, and in the summer, of course, swimming and other activities. And there's actually some fascinating research on bicycle riding. There's people that cannot walk who have Parkinson's, and they get on a bicycle and they go down the road with no problem at all. So how the brain works is still a mystery to us, but we know that physical activity is absolutely essential. Just like this little girl likes to move around.
I was interviewing Dr. Ken Rockwood once, who's does a lot of work with Alzheimer's research, and that's what it's always stuck with me. He said if exercise was a pill, I would write a prescription to everyone I know, and I thought that was a very sort of astute way of putting it. Bubbles. Gonna blow some bubbles? So as you mentioned, Parkinson's disease isn't a terminal disease, but it can. Thank you. It can obviously affect a person's quality of life,
Yeah.
but it seems like post-diagnosis, you've fallen in love, started a family, continued working. How has it affected, or has it, and if so, how has it affected sort of your quality of life and your everyday living?
My everyday living is precious. I think I took it for granted before. You know, I used to do talks for the Breast Cancer Society, and they're the most wonderful people in the world. It's full of humor, full of life, and full of everyday living. I think I really got a taste for what it means to really cherish it each moment and every day. It's kind of odd how people seem to need to get a hit with something, like a disease or a car accident or a loss of some kind before they cherish life. And it's even a possibility for love. But when you get a disease, you look at life a little fresher. You look at life every day you look at life as a gift.
And so you are a motivational speaker.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of, how has your diagnosis affected that? Have you incorporated it into what you do, or?
Well, yes, I do actually, because I have a bit of a stagger. So when I come on stage, I say, "Folks, you probably noticed that I have a stagger." And I said, "I want to share with you that despite the fact that it's 5 o'clock somewhere, I've actually not been drinking. I actually have a neurological disorder called Parkinson's. It affects 8,400 people in the Maritimes, well over 100,000 people in Canada, and it's the number two neurological disorder in Canada." And I use it as an opportunity to share some information about the disease. And I also say that I'm 45, I'm 50, or whatever. I'm 50 now, and I say this is the face of Parkinson's. It's not an old person's disease. And if you can't smell anymore, or if you have any issues with your hands or trembling or stiffness, please get checked so you get early diagnosis.
How important is it to maintain a sense of humor throughout something like this, a diagnosis of
Funny you should
Parkinson's
mention.
disease?
One of my talks is on the gift of the hit, and everyone is hit with things in their life. Everyone's hit with diseases, with setbacks, with hardship, and if you can't find the humor, then the thing that hits you runs you. So I look at life as 10% of what happens to you, 90% how we think about it. And how we think about it, we have two choices: either an attitude of gratitude or what I call sticky thinking. And when I first had the diagnosis, I was in about a year's bout of sticky thinking. I actually started writing a country song. I got the first line of the country song. I got stinking thinking on the road to Pity City. Because stinking thinking just takes you down that path towards Pity City, right? It's an okay place to be for a while, but eventually you have to find the gift of something. When you can find the gift, you can find the joy. When you find the joy, you get the love. And that is a better way to live, because things are going to happen to everybody in life, so why not enjoy the ride as long as we can.
So how do you think that we're doing in terms of awareness about Parkinson's disease?
Well, that's a big conversation. I just had a talk at a conference in Belleville on the weekend, and it was a really, really great public awareness and a lot of sponsorship. The college gave the room for the program. I think people are being much more aware of disorders like the Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, ALS, all these things that affect almost, one doesn't have to look very far to find someone that's affected by a disease. And not even in the cancer group, just in this group of neurological disorders and other disorders. So I think we're coming a long way, but of course there's still a long way to go because we haven't found a cure for it. There's no known cure, there's no known cause. So the more awareness we have, the more public figures like Michael J. Fox and Ron Weldy come out and say, look, here's another disease to think about, folks. the more we get awareness, the more we have people get it detected early, the more funds are put into research and making a difference in the world. So I think there's a lot of awareness happening, of course, but there's also way more stuff that we can do.
And so now Mary had mentioned that you do quite a bit of volunteer work with the Parkinsons Society. Why is that something that's important to you, to give back to them and to donate your time?
Well, it's such an honor. These folks are so courageous that, and when I talk, I actually celebrate the caregivers too. I celebrate the caregivers, the care partners that are out there, because my care partner Andrea, my baby, and the doggies that keep me on the road because he walks every day. These are all my care partners. And there's another care partner right there. Hello, thank you, honey. Thank you. So what they give to us is precious. They keep on giving like they're unsung heroes, and that's just a joy. So I'd like to celebrate the unsung heroes of the caregivers and the scientists and the Parkinson's organization folks, and also just give a little message to the folks with the disease that life can be rich and life can keep on going. So don't give up, and thanks to those folks that still believe in us.
Are people surprised when you tell them that you...
Is that too noisy?
Just a little bit, yeah.
She shouldn't be playing with her father's chest.
Yeah.
Those are daddy's.
Both dogs look pooped.
They're until they want to walk and
Yeah.
they come alive.
You just have to say the word and the ears perk up.
Yeah, they'll be okay.
Ought to be a dog.
It's a dog site.
Yeah. That's what I want to come back as.
So I'll let you know. I'm just gonna have to restart here.
Sure. Would you like to have your bubbles back? Or you want me to hang on to them for a
Why
while?
don't you go find your bunny book?
Ooh, that
Go
sounds...
find your bunny book.
It's a bunny book, Daddy, would you book? Question again?
Are people surprised when you tell them that you have Parkinson's disease, because you are younger than most people think and you don't have the tremors? Are they surprised when you tell them?
I think overall they are. There's one or two reactions is they say thank you for the courage to share, thank you for the gift of being honest and open with the world. Or they come up and say, look, my uncle, my aunt, my sister, and my brother has the disease, and I just want to say hi. So I get a couple different reactions.
So what would your main message be to perhaps someone who's going to see this and maybe they've newly been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease or have a loved one who has been? What would your main message to them be?
My main message would be to don't wait a year to tell somebody. There are people that love you and there are people that want to support you. And if you're lucky enough to have a care partner like my dear wife Andrea, and then go and do it, and also get involved in the Parkinson's Society. There's support groups all over the country, and they're wonderful people that care, and they're wonderful people that want to share and support you. And sometimes it's hard to find the courage to keep on going. It's hard to find the humor, the levity. But if you're with others, it makes the journey a lot easier.
And you certainly seem to be proof that life can still be full and wonderful after a diagnosis.
Well, after my diagnosis, because of my diagnosis, I refound my wife and my baby and my dogs. So it's actually linked to it, because I was a pretty stubborn guy. I was pretty much a bachelor for a long time. And then when I re-met Andrea and I had the diagnosis, I thought, life's too short to push off another girl. Life's too short. Come here. I actually have what I have now because of Parkinson's. Because as a single guy, as a bachelor guy, flying around the world doing my thing, I wasn't really very interested in settling down. I was kind of a free spirit. But since I was diagnosed, I said, look, life is too short. So say yes to love, say yes to baby, say yes to dog, say yes to settling down, say yes to being here and celebrating my life.
I think that those were probably all of the questions that I had in mind. Was there anything that you wanted to add, either of you, or anything that maybe that we missed, or anything at all you wanted to sort of get out there?
Well, I'd like to hear from the caregiver.
Yeah, that's
Mike
but we
No,
can.
we can still hear you.
We can, yeah.
Okay.
So what's it been like, sort of, for you as the wife and the mother and the caregiver? How's this whole journey been for you?
Oh, just hold on a second.
I'm passionate speaker here.
Yeah, just the microphone.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Try it again. Go ahead. Question.
For me, initially, it was a little bit of fear. And when Peter told me he had Parkinson's, we'd only been redating for a couple of months. So I had to really decide on the spot, is this somebody I'm interested in being with for the rest of my life, or am I going to walk out the door? And so I went with my instincts and realized that this was something I wanted to see where it would go. So I said yes to being with him. But it's since then, I mean, it's been wonderful. There hasn't been any challenges. Really, he calls me a caregiver, but really, other than care partner, but other than just being there for moral support and trying to encourage him and just be positive and so on, that's pretty much all I've done from a care perspective. But I certainly knew that down the road there could be a potential for more responsibility, and that's just something that I just believe that if it happens, then I will just face those challenges as they come.
Cross that bridge when you need to.
It was far worth the potential future challenges to be with someone that I love and being in a caring family and have a child and so on. So that was more important. And I really believe that you're not faced with challenges that you can't surpass or accept. So that's kind of where I'm at, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. I mean, I love the fact that Peter can be home and be a caregiver for our daughter when I'm working, and I trust that he's able to do that, and also the fact that he's just been it's for what he's born to do. So we're really fortunate that he can be home with her while he's able to work around the world as a speaker. So it's been really great. Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Both did a great job, and thank you so much for having us
You're welcome.
today.
Thanks a lot for coming out.
Hannah wasn't very cooperative.
You know what? That
Few
was
shots.
that was pretty
I made it
easy.
work.
Yeah.
So that was the hard part.